have so much, hundreds of thousands of people, as many people north of Loop 820 as south of Loop 820 at some point, if not right now, probably in the near future. But you start talking about how to build a city and how to have, civic goals and how to keep everyone north of Loop 820 involved in projects in the inner city, arts groups, civic groups, keep everybody connected to civic affairs. One real important trend that's happening is that now more people than ever live in Fort Worth but work somewhere else. We're more of a bedroom city than we used to be. And that is continuing to go that direction, that people are working in Plano or Frisco or somewhere else. So how do we keep those people connected to what's going on in Fort Worth, the civic needs in Fort Worth?
Fantastic. Good stuff. Mr. Austin.
Yes, sir.
Challenges.
Challenges is from a standpoint of commercial real estate. It's a destination that people want to come from all over the world to be here, and we're trying to keep up as far as our education system, make sure that we're competitive. We're in the run for the Amazon campus. So Fort Worth is a great destination for the culture of the things that are going on here. But that cost of transportation, if you travel in Fort Worth, those orange cones that the mayor talks about, when you're trying to move from downtown Fort Worth up to the Alliance Corridor or to the west side, those are some of the challenges that we have right now with transportation. We're working on the intermodal from downtown Fort Worth to the airport. Dallas is a little bit ahead of us on that, but that train and intermodal transportation will help take some of the stress off the roads. All right, Chris.
Good stuff. I like it. And I like we're all staying in our time frame. Right on. Okay, here we go. Very good. Talking about challenges that we face in the city. Okay, Chuck.
Excellent. Well, with the Ascend Concepts, we're a creative and marketing services firm on the south side. So for us, the biggest challenge for the city is really diversity of clients, diversity of industry, diversity of businesses. I think Fort Worth has grown over the years through some traditional industries such as gas and oil. Obviously, there's lots of bankers and lawyers and things that go along with that. But as the city grows, the more different industries we get in here, the more creative people get in terms of how do I make our business become aware in the community? What are some of the things I can do to get the word out about our business and ultimately help build those bridges and those dreams for entrepreneurs? So we're in the south side right now, for example. There's a lot of new businesses popping up, a lot of new business owners. And with that comes all of the other needs that go along with starting and growing a business. Obviously, banking and legal is certainly one of them, but creative, getting the message out, that's what we'd like to really see from the city is just diversity of industries.
Right on. Great. Cal, let me have those glasses right there. In that case right there. Great, thank you. Good deal. Let's go, Robert. Good deal. I've got to change my glasses real quick. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, so that was great on challenges. Let me swing it around this way. Let's bring this camera a little closer for audio. Okay, so when we talk about, let me swing it around this way just a little bit. That was a great session. All right, so that was challenges. Now let's talk about emotional intelligence. We good with our framing here, Kyle? Okay, back up just a little bit, Robert, for me. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to swing back a little. I'm going to swing back in the middle for this section. Okay. All right, gentlemen, swing around me if you will. Let's come under the mic right here. Okay. Everyone?
You're ready.
Okay. Yeah. Here we go. Okay. Let's talk about emotional intelligence. All righty. How do we? And then I'm going to step back and I'm going to let you all talk for 2 minutes about this fact about how do we become more emotional intelligent about bridging the gap between Fort Worth and Dallas. Because what I see now is when we talk about Dallas is that we kind of had this Amon Carter mentality that we're Fort Worth and that Dallas. So let me tell you what I love about Dallas. The Dallas Stars, Dallas Mavericks, Mark Cuban. I love the fact it's an international city. It's Dallas Digital Summit. I love Dallas, but I can't ride my horse to Fred at Dallas. I can't ride the Grand Entry. But in 2020, we're going to be the 9th largest metropolitan city in the United States. We need Dallas to grow. You guys get around this microphone and talk about emotional intelligence, what we need to do to grow together.
Well, I'll dive into that, and I'll really start with a comment that Bud made in his statements about Fort Worth being a bedroom community. But I'll tell you, that kind of statement drives me crazy. Because I've grown up in Fort Worth. I don't want to see Fort Worth become a bedroom community. I think we have a lot of opportunity for growth here. I think there's a lot of vibrant things happening in Fort Worth, and I think kind of this long-standing opinion that we've had this animosity with Dallas. I think that's a historical thing. I think if you talk with anyone in the business community, I know if you talk with anyone at the city, at the chamber, we don't have this competitive situation with Dallas. We understand that they're a more recognized city. There's some things that Dallas does great, but there's also some things that Fort Worth does great. And I think we need to both capitalize on what we bring to the table from both communities. And I think if we're doing the things that we need to be doing as far as helping our businesses grow, diversify our community, make sure that we're driving investment in the proper places, that we'll get away from that trend of being a bedroom community sooner than we think.
Rob, that is a big deal to continue to emphasize that Fort Worth is a central city and its own unit, and just the numbers are changing and are not going that direction. But Chris used the term emotional intelligence. It's just our maturity as a city and the fact that we have to recognize our position in the market. Frisco is growing. Collin County is going to be the biggest county in the Metroplex according to projections. Collin County will be bigger than either Dallas or Tarrant County. But nobody in Frisco or Plano is up there saying, we're Frisco, we're not Dallas, we're Frisco. They love Dallas, they sell Dallas, they promote Dallas, and then they're not Dallas. What we have to do is make sure that we let everybody know Dallas is an amenity that we provide. It's convenient. Chris can go to those Stars and Mavericks games, then he can come home and be in Fort Worth.
Well, it's just an exciting time right now that our mayors are working together. That concept of not coming and working together. So that's going to bring us closer together. They're looking the economic of growing the region and not just thinking about self. So I think that's going to be important. Very excited about the Rangers and building their Dome Stadium, Texas Live, the Lowe's Live. So Arlington's right in the hunt too. So as a Metroplex, Fort Worth leads as far as Cowboys and culture. People are coming from all over the world, and I promote on Jim Austin Online. What about a staycation? Come over and spend some time in Fort Worth. Go up, watch the herd roam. But Fort Worth is a great destination. But we are working together right now, which has never happened in my 40 years in Fort Worth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. And I'm relatively new to the area. I moved here about 20 years ago, and I lived in Dallas. And when you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So to me, every problem is a marketing and branding issue. When we talk about Dallas, we need to use Dallas to our advantage when it helps us, and we certainly need to accentuate our positives and our unique characteristics when we're trying to sell Fort Worth. If you look back at the history of Dallas and Fort Worth, they started not as part of this DFW Metroplex, right? Fort Worth started for very different reasons than Dallas, and they've both grown up. And now all of a sudden, everything's kind of merged in between, and we've got all these new communities with new amenities. And how do we position ourselves with them? Obviously, Fort Worth has really kind of taken the lead on transportation and manufacturing and logistics, whereas maybe Dallas has this reputation with telecom and technology. How do we use those things to our advantage, and how do we also kind of fill the gaps as we grow together, and of course all the other millions of communities in between us? It's really a special time, and I love working with people like you that see that long-term vision.
Okay, so when we talk about Cowboys and culture, Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo is right around the corner, so I may want to make sure all you all get your tickets now at the fwssr.com, Brad Barnes. When we talk about Cowboys and culture, we've talked about that a lot.
Sure.
Does it help us? Does it hurt us? We talked about going to South by Southwest. We promote Fort Worth. We've got it's an international city. We have the 2 largest transporters in the world. We don't have transportation to the airport. We will. We don't have a Tier 1 university. We don't have a music venue. When you went to the South by Southwest and you went to the music tent, what did you hear?
Yeah.
Country and Western music. How many people in the tent, right? So Cowboys and culture is great to promote the CBD, right?
True.
But if we're trying to promote technology in other parts of the city, does Cowboys and culture, it's a yes, no question, help us or hurt us?
Both.
Help us or hurt us?
Both.
Help us or hurt us?
Not an either or.
Okay, great. So let's talk to, I'm going to take my hat off for a second. I'm on the board of the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo, and I'll be real honest with you. We've had the same for 50 years, okay? So if it does both, why aren't we taking what's happening on the north side to the south side and running those steers on the south side?
Well, it's like your question really kind of leads us to kind of say, one way or the other. But the reality is, especially again with marketing and branding, you got to take your advantages when they play to your advantages, and you've got to accentuate other things when that's what your objective is. The Cowboys and culture thing is very important when we start talking about bringing in first-time visitors, bringing in people that are looking for that unique experience. How do we differentiate ourselves from Arlington or Dallas or any of the other communities around here? That's when it's super important. It's not necessarily in my wheelhouse, but I love that we have it, and it's so ingrained and it's so recognizable that we get a lot of value out of that. So how do we use that? The question I think Chris is alluding to is really how do we promote everything else? How do we get all of these other great amenities and great assets and great people to the forefront? That's really the challenge I think we're talking about.
Right. And I think that as Chris was talking about, I think what you were trying to get to, Chris, is how does that play? How does that help us from a growth standpoint? We talk to a lot of our industry stakeholders about what that cowboy brand means to them, and particularly when they're thinking about trying to attract young millennials, that talented workforce, educated workforce that we deem necessary and vital to continue our growth in Fort Worth. They say that brand does not necessarily play well with them. There are some assumptions that go along with it.
It's limiting.
It is, and so Chuck, I agree with you. I think that there are people that come to this community that the first thing they want to do is they want to go see the stockyards. That is what makes us unique. That sets an identity for us. But if we're talking about developing our growth and developing our businesses, there is a broader picture there that we need to also focus on. So, the Western heritage can speak to a lot of things. It can speak to the free spirit. It can speak to entrepreneurship and innovation and individualism. And all of that can be wrapped up in that Western heritage. But there's also some great museums. There's some great cultural amenities. We have a great downtown. We have a wonderful, great educated workforce here. So all those things we could play on, as well as continue to talk about what that Western heritage means to us.
Well, some of this lies in the nature of the brands of Cowboys and culture. We need to deconstruct that and think about whether those brands are good today. The cowboy spirit isn't as popular as it might have been. The cowboy, Western music and Western themes kind of ebb and flow. The 80s urban cowboy was a big deal, and it comes and goes about whether people think cowboys are cool or cowboys are backward. But people can't think that we're backward or that we're stuck in the past. The image of Texas is a lot better than the image of cowboys, and that people think that Texas is a diverse state, that we have all kinds of people doing all kinds of things and a great booming economy. When you say culture, you say, well, we've got culture. That people are not sure what that is. What we're really saying is that we have Texas, and we have the best of Texas, and we have the best of the arts, right in one city. We're not getting that across when we just throw out cowboys and culture.
Well, one of the things is that we're a tourist destination, and that cowboys of culture is important, and maybe the tourism does overshadow the entrepreneurship and the business. I mean, you've got Ross Perot with that industrial airport out there. And then you got TCU with one of the best business schools, the Neely School of Business. And then the area is really, from a standpoint of technology, we're on point. And there's nobody better. But changing that message and but don't lose the tourist, the culture part, but trying to extend and show the technology part. Because we are a destination.
We have to let people know that we have an international airport, that we're part of the world.
Right.
And that is DFW.
Right. And let me, before we get I do have to applaud Jim Austin specifically, because what he has done with the Cowboys of Color Rodeo, what that has done to expand the image of what people think are cowboys and what that history is like, I think that has gone a long way towards helping people understand that this is a diverse community that still has a very strong Western heritage. And so, Jim, thank you for that work. I think that's been great.
Thank you.
And that's part of it's one of the things that we do at the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. And also when we talk about North, something I think goes under the radar every single day is what Mike Berry and his team do at Alliance. Mm-hmm. That is an international operation. Okay, now let's talk about, this changing of the guard. Who is our next generation of leaders?
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
do you think millennials or?
Well, who is? I need you to stay open to the camera.
Yes.
You're a handsome man. So hold on just a second.
I appreciate that.
Okay. So let's think about. I'm going to start with you, Robert. When we think about our next, because I don't really know who are our next group of leaders, the next people that are going to be leading. When I think of real estate, I think of this young kid named Chris Powers. Mm-hmm. He's doing a lot of interesting things. But do you all see any faces that are kind of leading the way as far as leaders of tomorrow?
Sure. Well,
2 minutes.
Chuck's right here. He's one of them.
Great.
But just last night we were at the opening for the OB Macaroni building, and N2G Ventures, Susan Krupp and her sister put that together. I mean, I think they're leaders in the community. I think Jeremiah Anderson over at the Black Chamber of Commerce, Cynthia Segovia at the Hispanic Chamber, Shannon Fletcher, and I could, Jonathan Morris that owns Fort Worth Barbershop. Hey, I could just sit here and name off names upon names upon names, man. I just think there are a lot of great people that are doing a lot of great work in this community that may or may not be recognized, but they are coming in, they're bringing some really creative, innovative ideas to the table, and they're really focusing on sitting down and understanding how we can all move forward together. So it's not Chuck just out doing some things by himself. When Chuck has an idea, he brings in a team and a bunch of people that come together and work with him on a few things. So I'm really excited about our future young leaders that are happening here in the community. I get to work with a lot of them through our work at the Gwynn School, and so I'm just really impressed with what I've seen and looking forward to the contributions that they're going to bring to the city.
Excellent. Well, I'm just excited to hear that I might be a young leader still. This is great.
You don't have great.
I feel like
yet,
I'm
so
tipping
you're
past
definitely
that. You mentioned some great names. You know, one of the reasons Chris asked me to be involved here is obviously my business, and I'm super involved in the South Side, near South Side area. And what I love about the near South Side area right now is it's not one or two people pushing that message forward. We've got 40, 50, 60 entrepreneurs that are doing their thing and doing it passionately. And as they get more exposure and they get more growth, they start moving from a local community business to a regional, to a city, to a national. Right. You talk about somebody like Carrie Crow last night with Melt Ice Creams. I mean, she's getting national exposure and she's bringing that back. Obviously what happened with Leon Bridges is bringing a notoriety back to Fort Worth. I look at somebody like Mike Brennan in near Southside who has found his calling. He is all about urban development, walkable, livable cities. How do we get him a bigger microphone? How do we get him more exposure? Well, you know what? We don't really need to because he's doing it himself. And all of the community in Southside is just really raising the bar in terms of what we need to do in terms of bringing diversity of industry and businesses, which then in turn fosters that next generation of leaders.
Well, just about everybody on the South Side, but I also write about restaurants in my other job, and I think we talk a lot about the Tim Loves, John Bonnells, and that's a great generation. But we have guys like Marcus Pasley, Clay Pigeon, Piatello. Here's somebody whose father was an officer at DFW Airport who has that picture of where Fort Worth fits, as related to the rest of the world, not just cowboy cooking on the west side of Fort Worth. He's opened a couple of good restaurants. They get a lot of good attention. We have this tremendous number of 20-ish and 30-ish chefs. You look at the Heims over at Heim Barbecue on Magnolia. You look at the young entrepreneurs who are going into restaurants now that in my generation they would have become bankers or realtors. Now they're restaurant, beer, distilling, brewing entrepreneurs. They have all these startup businesses bringing great attention to Fort Worth.
One of the things too that we can be excited about, there's a new CEO of Medical City, Jurek Sims, just came to town and he's on the way up, and he's a young CEO, the youngest in the nation. The other day I met Eddie Hartford, who's the general manager of Dannon's. But one of the things that Fort Worth does, I've been a member of Fort Worth Rotary Club for 40 years. The leadership training with Leadership Fort Worth, where they bring leaders together to bounce and get to know the best of each other. So we're always looking to bring young folks that got talent that want to lead. So Fort Worth is definitely ahead of the curve in making sure that we have leaders for tomorrow. And our mayor does a tremendous job of promoting the region and making sure that Fort Worth the world knows about Fort Worth.
Now the other real question, Chris, is the next where's the next generation of philanthropists? Because a lot of the grandchildren of the great philanthropic families in Fort Worth are in Dallas or in California or in New York. We don't know where the next generation of great philanthropists will come from.
And today I'd like to make a special announcement. And on behalf of, there's 4,300 nonprofits in Fort Worth. So one of the things that I think is most interesting is the fact is when we talk about all the developments in the Fort Worth, and this is kind of where I want to round out the show, is the fact that I really feel like the city is being marketed against itself, is that we've got Sundance Square, and we have the Cultural District, and we have Clear Fork, and we have all these different areas of the city. We have South Side, and I feel like the city is growing so fast that now the city is very much being marketed against itself. So how do we move forward against marketing against itself, and that we have Crockett Row and we have 7th Street and we have all these different developments. How do we move forward and market the city together? Because if I'm on the north side, I'm not really that concerned about what's going on the south side. And I can honestly say, I mean, if I can quit, you know, from that standpoint, right?
Sure, sure.
So how do we engage where we all come together? Plus, here's my biggest deal. And Fort Worth today wants to come together, bring all the chambers together, not with country and western music, but with some other, how about Leon?
Sure.
We are the only major city in the United States without what? A trade show. How can we not have a trade show? You know what the largest trade show in Fort Worth is for small business put on? By the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. It goes 3 weeks long. Please visit it. It's a great trade show. Why can't we have a trade show? I mean, as small business, it seems like we would come together with and I know there's initiatives and different things. So let's talk about how do we come together where we come out to the Austin Event Center, right?
Yes, sir.
Beautiful facility.
Thank you.
But I'm not on that part of town. Why do I care about what's going on out there?
Well, we're on the.
But right, okay. Robert, tell us, how do we come together? Let's turn to the camera. You guys make sure you talk to camera. This is your spiel.
Sure.
Let's try to open the slide over here just a little
All
bit.
right,
Great.
okay.
Thank you.
So I think I'll say a couple of things. So we recognize that that's becoming a little bit of a challenge for us, particularly with all the growth that we're having. One thing that both the city and the chamber embarked upon about a year ago is beginning the strategic planning initiative. So historically, Fort Worth has basically had a very wide arms wide open appeal towards how we deal with development, how we deal with branding and messaging and marketing the city. What we haven't been, and I think part of that's just given the amount of success and interest that we've had, is that we haven't necessarily been always strategic about the types of things that we go after from an economic development standpoint, about how we market the city, about how we pull in partners, how do we leverage partnerships. So if we have if you have a data center or an industrial development that's going up in the Alliance area, maybe there's some office component that could be in downtown or over in the south side. How do we leverage some of those partnerships? And so that's really what we've been working on, both entities, the city and chamber, for the past year. And I think that's going to be our focus for the next 4 to 5 years, is how do we leverage those partnerships and really try to be strategic about the types of things we're attracting here. And then a lot of that involves bringing the right people around the table to help us in that initiative.
One of the things we're doing in the commercial field, the Society of Commercial Real Estate, we had a trade show last year, first time. So next April, we're doing it again. And that concept of what Quinn was talking about, is talking about issues that affect everybody. But all these areas are so important and are so powerful when you go to any one of these areas that we mentioned earlier, that it's a destination. But the Chamber of Commerce and the Convention and Visitors Bureau is doing a phenomenal job of sitting around the table. I know in January, Bob Jameson sent me an email, and it was about 40 people that we're going to sit down, I think, on January 11th to talk about some of those issues that you just mentioned, Quinn.
You know, I think that one of the things that Fort Worth has to realize is that we are part of Tarrant County, and we have to grow with Arlington. You know, the greatest successes we've had are when Fort Worth teamed with Plano and Arlington to host the Super Bowl, to host major events. You know, that was something big hit. What have we done like that since then? We didn't get in as much on the Final Four planning and the NBA All-Star Game planning. One of the best things we have going is Arlington. You know, when Fort Worth was not blamed, but when there was worry in the 60s that Fort Worth didn't have leadership, that Fort Worth was directionless, that's when Fort Worth leaders and Arlington leaders teamed up. They built the convention center in Fort Worth and the Arlington baseball stadium at the same time, and that's when Fort Worth was also building DFW Airport. You had all three of those big developments in the 60s. That pulled Fort Worth out of a ditch. People felt like there was a leadership vacuum. Now, a lot of the big things that are going on, Texas Live, the ballparks are going on in Arlington. We have to be aware that Arlington's a great help to Fort Worth.
Yeah. You know, one of the things Robert says really a lot of times, and very eloquent, I just love, it's the idea that part of what we've done with Fort Worth is we've grown despite ourselves.
Right.
Like, it's just kind of happened. And the common thing that we keep talking about is, hey, Fort Worth's growing. It's coming. It's going to happen. So how do we keep from marketing against ourselves? I think it's going to start with what we're doing here, which is just conversations. connecting people, making those opportunities become more and more available. I mean, again, going back to the South Side, what's happened there over the last 20 years has just now gotten it to the point where the CVB all of a sudden says, oh, when we have people in town, we want to send them there. What can you do for us? How can we help you tell the story about the South Side? I promise you it wasn't there 3 or 4 years ago, and it was never going to be there just because we wanted it. We had to build it, and it had to start locally. Now that we have that, we're getting that exposure, we're getting those opportunities.
Yeah, the diversity, the Fort Worth is so diverse now than when I got here 40 years ago. When the Chamber of Commerce is trying to, a Convention and Visitors Bureau is trying to bring in a new convention, they always visit the Multicultural Western Heritage Museum just to show the diversity. So diversity is so important that we show that, and I think we do it very well.
Well, that's not just a word. I mean, people have to realize that in order to keep selling what we are in Fort Worth, it has to include everybody. We have to tell everybody's story. That's what y'all do a great job of.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you. I think it turned out well.
Think so?
I do too.
Great conversation, great dialogue. Lots of things to think about.
Thank you, Chris.
Really, well, thank you for being here on this first kind of, I don't want to think of a round table, it's more thinking we're kind of thinking of. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Inside Fort Worth Business. We look forward to seeing you next Sunday at on Inside Fort Worth Business. Please stay tuned on YouTube and Twitter for our special Out of Bounds segment where we're going to talk about our most talked about topic on Twitter. We look forward, thank you all for being here, and we look forward, everyone has a great Thanksgiving. And make sure everyone to make it downtown tonight for the Parade of Lights, which will be a fantastic event in downtown Fort Worth, and have a fantastic Thanksgiving. I'm Chris Quinn for Inside Fort Worth Business. Have a great week. Good. Want to get a picture real quick?
Thanks, Howard. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Good job.